governor at the state level. We do not need the approval of the president at the federal level. It is legislative at both levels. So more than likely what will happen in 2014 is some actions will be starting to form. But understand why I asked the question in Colorado. It took 16 years, at least 16 years for Colorado to form. There's going to be multiple rounds of battles, if you will, on this. Political jockeying that has to happen over time. I mean, the other side of this right now is we're approaching county governments across the state and talking to county commissioners and citizens and asking the question, is there a disconnect between rural versus urban? So ask that question. I think there probably isn't a county commissioner that exists outside the Denver polar corridor that would say there's not a disconnect. The question is, what are you going to do about it? So if you wait and wait and wait, the problem is going to get worse. The urban populations are going to continue to grow. Concentration of power will continue to happen. We have the Californication, if you will, of the state of Colorado, with a lot of non-Colorado values moving into the state, if you will. And that's, in my opinion, only going to get worse. I think probably most of you would agree with this. So waiting is not an option. Problem is, right now, there is no coordinated rural voice. The closest thing that probably would come to that would be the CCI, the Colorado Counties, Inc. But there are fights from the western slope to the Front Range. There are fights to upstream and downstream over water, for just taking water as an example. And the reality is we have been divided and conquered instead of united and fighting as a team. So we think that the 51st State Initiative is that mechanism for rural counties to aggregate a voice and to fight on behalf of primarily the rural areas of the state, and I'll talk about that in a second, what that means, against the Denver-Boulder corridor. The reality is it's not just rural populations that agree that Denver and Boulder has been usurping values and concentrating power for a long time. There are other urban areas in the state that agree. And so, as an example, we met with El Paso County about two and a half weeks ago, and one of their commissioners, we met with 2 out of the 5 commissioners, and one of their commissioners said, if you guys leave this state, you're leaving us behind, and that is a problem. They don't want to be left behind with a weaker conservative voice, if you will. So we have talked to some blue counties, and we've gotten equal frustration. We met with Huerfano and Los Animas counties a few weeks ago. Both voted for Obama in 2012. They have the same arguments and same frustration over funding. Funding doesn't, this big sucking sound into Denver, money doesn't make even the money that is given to Denver on behalf of those counties doesn't make its way back out. So with a model that is locally controlled, primarily local control, and a local flavor than of government, then we believe that this model can be effective in the majority, if not all, of the counties really outside the Denver-Boulder corridor. So the question you guys have to ask yourselves as citizens of Mesa County, and you have to talk about with your commissioners, if they're not going to support this, how are they going to work with the rest of the rural communities, or counties, if you will, to be able to fight the Denver-Boulder corridor and this devolution of values?
One of our commissioners has a question.
Oh.
I want to just take a sec to introduce, thank Commissioner Rose Puglisi for showing up, and for John Justman, Commissioner John Justman.
I'm a little bit late because we came from another meeting, but so just to let you know some of the things that we've been thinking about in Mesa County and we've been working on. 51st State sounds great. Is it easier to annex? I know you have Wyoming here, but I've actually talked to Ken Ivory from Utah about potentially moving at least Mesa County into Utah. And they seem very receptive. They're taking back their federal lands. And it seems, considering Mesa County 72% federal lands, that would be maybe a better fit. I don't know enough about Wyoming, but I know Utah is willing to take us.
Right.
So is that a viable option, or how much easier is that than forming our own state?
Well, it's only easier in that you don't need congressional approval to do it. So annexing to another state, you need state constitutional amendment, state legislative approval on both sides. I'm assuming you need a state constitutional amendment in Utah and or Wyoming, because the boundaries of Colorado are defined in Article 1 of the Constitution. So would it be easier? It would be easier, yes, I think it would. Is it the right solution? I guess I don't know if that is the right solution. It depends upon, Utah, that sounds like the right approach. I think Wyoming is red, but is it the right red? And that's the same question. I know Utah, for example, I'm just thinking out loud here, I know that they're working on, it's not state banking, it's acknowledging silver and gold as a currency. So that's, to me, is a good step. Yeah, a good step in the right direction. So I think I think nobody's ever brought that up, to be honest. I mean, I think that I've heard that over here as an idea, but we haven't started studying it. And it wouldn't just need to, it just wouldn't, it could be not just Mesa County, but it could be everybody. I mean, because in essence, if I don't have a map here, but if you drew the state of Colorado, we believe that we can connect from the far southeast all the way around across the top, down the western slope and make a contiguous state. State has to be contiguous. State cannot, and the state couldn't surround Denver and Boulder and put it inside it. Those are the two conditions of the state.
Well, and that's my issue. There's state initiatives. I've got a lot of friends. A good friend of mine is Barb Kirkmeyer.
Speak up.
And she really wants us to join in the 51st State Initiative. And I said, we're not contiguous. You can be governor, I can be lieutenant governor, but it's not going to work. And so I am more than willing to explore lots of different options.
Right.
As long as they're viable options, I will put my effort and time into it. The other thing I think you should look into is there is an organization called Associated Governments of Northwest Colorado, and a lot of us are a part of that organization.
Right.
And I know even Montrose wants to join that organization as opposed to the Southwest Corner organization. But that, I think, we could model into some sort of voice to represent the Western Slope in the meantime that we are working on these efforts.
Yeah, I think Barb is going to attend, somebody's going to attend that at GNW, yeah. So I think annexing into Utah is a viable option. I think whether it would make sense to annex with Utah or Wyoming or portions of counties on both, I think should be open for discussion. I was going to make another comment on that.
Jeff,
Yeah.
and one of the things about the 51st state is if we can do this, it creates two conservative senators in Washington. So it helps tip the balance of power back towards rural areas. It gives us more voice in Washington, not diluting it.
Right. Yeah, and actually, if you saw the front row, Commissioner, that's the three options I think that are viable to address the rural versus urban divide. You saw annexing to Wyoming, that came up as one of the meetings, the feedback from one of the meetings. I think we should add annexing to Utah. Now I want to go back and address the contiguous state issue. So the reality is, when we would go to amend the state constitution, and probably we'll have to do that as a citizens initiative, probably won't be referred by the legislature, we can draw those lines however we want. We don't have to have permissions from county commissioners. We don't have to have permissions from citizens. We are putting forward a ballot initiative, and the people of the state of Colorado get to vote on it, right? So the contiguous nature of and just thinking out loud, if you understand a map, has anybody not seen the map on our site? The colors, have you seen it? So we have the green colors. We have a bunch of green colors on this side. We have Larimer County, which is uncolored at this point. Then we have Jackson and Grand, which have colors. Then we have Route. And the challenge really is to get from the northeastern part of the state, and I think we're going to pick up some more in the southeast at some point, to get over to the western slope. We've got to, in theory, we've got to go through Larimer and Route, right? But we don't have to have all of them. We only have to have the rural northern portion of those counties to be able to build that bridge from the east to the west. So that's the easy answer, whether it's 51st state, annexing to Wyoming, or annexing to Utah. When we get to the point where we are developing that ballot initiative, which means we've got to change the boundaries of Article 1, we make the contiguous at that point. And the reality is, people in rural Larimer County, the people in northern rural Route County, they would rather be with us than to continue to be, you know. And then the other comment I would have is you know, back to my comments on we're continuing to talk to commissioners in Los Animas and Huerfano as example. We followed the CDOT presentation down there, and that section down, I think Section 2, the CDOT Section 2, they've got no funding whatsoever. They're not even getting funding to maintain their state roads, let alone for new projects, which is pretty indicative of the entire state. I'm assuming it's probably indicative of here.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think most counties that understand what's going on feel the neglect from a top-heavy, Denver-centric legislature. So as long as we build a governmental model that respects local control and has some certainties, if you will, so that there's the rural versus urban, the Phillips County proposal being part of that, so the rural communities have a voice against the urban communities. Then we could bring in El Paso County, for example, which is a large urban population. People would be concerned about them becoming the new Boulder or Denver. People think that that's going to be Greeley, and that's if you go into Morgan County or you go down to Bent or Otero or Crowley, that's what they're afraid of, is Greeley grows to be the next Boulder because all that concentration of power. So we have to prevent that. In my mind, we cannot proceed without everybody feeling comfortable that we have a bifurcated model that is urban versus rural to offset each other. We might not have a discussion. And that is either building that into the Senate model, the Phillips County proposal, 1 senator per county, or to build that in there by vote, or build it in there by appointment.
Which we support as a county. Through CCI, we will be supporting that as it comes through the legislature. One more question that somebody had brought up to me that I didn't really know the answer to was, under Colorado water law, if we were to secede or if we were to form a new state, our water does not go with us. How do we overcome that challenge, or how do we respond to those comments?
Yeah, well, I think the argument doesn't have proper context to it. So, I mean, is water is it publicly owned or privately owned?
Public.
No.
Private. I mean, it's publicly administered, but it's privately owned. Right, I mean, it's administered through the Colorado, yeah, go ahead.
I think and we talked about this before the meeting tonight, I think the legal standing that we go by is that because the federal government has not completed the contract of the Enabling Act of Colorado by returning our public lands to us, that voids the contract with the federal government. Because that contract took place in 1976, I don't think any water compact took place, or 1876, I don't think that any water compact that took place after that Enabling Act would be valid because of the legal dissolution of the contract with the federal government. So you can go back and say, guess what? Colorado no longer exists as a state. Those compacts are null and void because the federal government failed to live up to their contractual obligations.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting theory. That's another thing I think we can study, independent of all these other options. I'll make a couple comments. Yeah, you're going to make some comments on water?
I'm surely not a water expert, but the compact was from 1922. It included the lower basin states, the upper basin states, and I don't know that the feds were involved in it. I mean, maybe they were. I'm not aware of that. But this water compact, the thing that's great for Mesa County is almost all of our real irrigation rights that that the farmers use around here were all prior to 1922. So we have old water rights.
Right.
They can talk to you about how, they're going to put a call on the river. As far as Mesa County cares, I don't give a damn.
Yeah.
The water that's going to get called out is the water going through the tunnel.
Well, I would say a couple things, and I know Commissioner Conway is working on a position paper on water on this particular issue. A couple of thoughts off the top of my head, and I'm no water expert anyway. I'm a bean counter by trade, but as I've gotten some feedback, number one, water is private property. Number two, there's a possibility in lieu of us forming our own state that we could do a constitutional amendment to draw out the Denver-Boulder corridor. More difficult politically, but let's say we had 50 counties that were supportive of this model. They're the ones that are trying to remake Colorado. It's not that we're trying to leave Colorado and leave the heritage behind. So that is actually being talked about as a viable 2014 strategy. To me, it's a little bit more of a difficult sell because you're pushing them out of the state. They've got to form their own government. They control the legislature. You know, it's not to say that it's not an interesting strategy and it's not the right solution, but it's a harder political sell. So that's an option. The other thing I would say is I think that we'll have more headwaters in the new state, if you will, than are not in the new state. So, for example, Grand County, Larimer County, Park County, Mesa County.
Not really headwaters.
Where's some more headwaters over here? Forgive me for my ignorance.
On the Mesa?
Headwaters on Grand Mesa. I mean, there's.
No, Summit County.
Summit County's a big one, yes. Yeah. So,
Gunnison, down Pitkin Way.
Sacramento.
Yeah.
Sawash.
yeah. So I think that may help the issue. And then I think in terms of the other thing that Sean is working on, I think, is this mid-60s Supreme Court case that in essence says private property rights cannot be changed when political boundaries are redrawn. I mean, just think about how often political boundaries have been redrawn in the state of Colorado, right? You have the creation of Broomfield County, for example, the creation of Centennial. Yeah, I mean, there have been changes to political boundaries, a lot of them since the Colorado Compact, or the compacts have been developed. But do people lose their right to that water if it flows through those changes in boundaries? No, they don't, because it's doctrine of prior appropriations. That is a senior water right, or subject to a more senior water right. They will never lose that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that unscrupulous water grabbers, a large Denver law firm, isn't going to attack a change like they have attacked a change. But moving water from one part of the state, water rights, and I think there are like bylaws of ditch companies that restrict how water can be moved. I mean, that's my understanding. There's some bylaws of ditch companies that say, like if you dry and buy a property in northern Weld County, that doesn't necessarily mean that water can be quote unquote automatically reallocated to use in Denver or Aurora.
Water is tied to land.
No, it's not. In Grand Valley irrigation, I can sell my water.
Well, it depends on the water, it depends on the area.
Well,
but
every ditch company has their own thing, but everybody, the ditch companies in western Colorado, Mesa County or statewide, Grand Valley Irrigation is one of the very few privately owned ditch companies. The rest of them are put in by the Bureau of Reclamation.
My water rights are tied to my property. I cannot sell.
You're not part of Grand Valley Irrigation.
That's true, that's true.
So you can't sell your water, but technically, I could sell my water. I could sell my water to you. I don't know if you can get it, but I can sell it. But you have to remember, Colorado water law is in perpetuity a job for attorneys.
Right.
Utah's Colorado or water law is quite a bit different than Colorado's. We're first in time, first in line.
Right.
And Hickenlooper's big game plan here, and the River District can give you all this garbly goop about how, oh, this is going to be, we are going to, I call it the redistribution of water within the state of Colorado to give the Front Range more water and give us less.
And what was the public trust doctrine that was almost on the ballot last year, which was in essence
That would turn Colorado water law upside down.
Exactly. That was in essence trying to change the whole element of private ownership to public ownership.
True.
Right.
Absolutely.
So your water rights in this county and across the state are already under assault. And the question would have been, let's say that went to ballot last year and passed at the state level. What would the state government, which is the proper role, would they have fought that?
More like
or would they have encouraged that because the state government is trying to use that to take money or take water out of rural areas and aggregate it, even whether it's the water itself or just the concentration of power, right?
Even we have a local little ski area here, and when the ownership changed, the Forest Service was demanding that they give that water right, the ski area, give the water right back to the feds.
Right.
And the ski industry fought it. I don't know where it ever wound up at, but it probably hasn't been settled yet.
I think it's still in court.
But there's a whole lot of these water people that talk, they don't realize water runs downhill. I mean, that's what they know.
Yeah. Oh, we understand that Weld County very well this week.
Yeah.
This Phillips proposal sounds really exciting to me because it is populist. It would be the kind of sell that would have appeal.
Right.
It's voting for the underdog.
Yeah.
Because the rural counties are the underdog, and I think that would be so good in undermining the centralization of power from Boulder and Denver.
Right, and that would be
a citizens' initiative.
Good within the context of the state, and it may be a citizens' initiative. So I almost think if the legislature doesn't play nice next year, which we don't think that they probably will, but we'll give them the opportunity to play nice and refer something to the ballot on our behalf. If they force us to go the citizens' initiative route, I think we do both things. We do the Phillips County proposal, and we do the state initiative to kick Denver and Boulder out of the state next year. That's the first salvo. That's the way I see it. What's that?
That's the lever.
Yeah. Then they're at risk of either one of those two things passing. Now, the problem with the Phillips County proposal passing a citizens initiative is it has a U.S. Supreme Court case standing in its way of being implemented. So the question would be, would the governor and the attorney general say we cannot implement this, or we're not going to implement this because of the Supreme Court case, are they going to pull a California Amendment 8, walk away from it?
Of course they are.
Yeah, well, and I think that's, and I'm a little bit concerned about the Lucy